because in the beginning, I'd think to myself, oh, that's good. I'll note that down and I'll get that next time. And then I realized, even if it is riding your bike up and down the path, there's never a next time because everything's different. You know, the light will be different. The jackets are different. You know, it's never going to be that moment. So if you see it or you feel it and you're like, this is something, you have to act on it on the spot. And the trick that I had was I had to kind of do that and then get back to the dinner without anybody kind of noticing that I stepped away, you know. So that was my kind of...
Wow. You know, that's a pure exercise in being fully present and like realizing moments and taking advantage of the actual moment. That's and that tip, I think anybody that's trying to capture photography of their family in those moments, especially if they're a pro, if there's someone that's actually done this thing, you know, that is really, really helpful. That is, and it's really interesting and it's really, really strong. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm really honoured and grateful to be here. And I'm in Australia, as you know, in the southwest, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional landowners that live and work on, and the Noongar, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for that. And we will go ahead and slide into our first question. It's actually not even really a question. It's more a prompt. It is, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Oh, blimey. So I'm Sam.
That's a loaded question, right?
Yeah. I'm a photographer. I'm from London, South London, born and raised, went to school there, and I've been a photographer for quite a long time now. I guess I got into photography when I was about 20, and I've been working professionally since 22. Started out working in the music business, doing record covers, and things have gone a long way since then. Worked all over the world, traveled all over the world. And I guess that's really what we're going to talk about, my journey from Croydon in South London all the way to bailing up in the southwest of Western Australia. And if I had $1 for every time someone said to me, how did you end up here, like it's a little town, quite remote? So I guess, yeah, that's what we're going to be exploring today, I think.
Yeah, I'll dive into that. I'm actually quite curious about stuff like that. Is these little journeys and these things that take us to places and those times and those shifts that actually happen. I think they're really, really interesting. And as a photographer, we actually get to see a little bit of that evolution. It shows up in our work, and that's why I think this show is so interesting. And so, especially diving into people's work. But before we kind of jump into that, talk to me a little bit about who Sam was before he was a photographer. Were you always artistic? Were you artistically inclined? Talk to me a little bit about that, and then maybe kind of talk to me about how you got into photography, and we'll start there.
Yeah, sure. So I think I was, I always liked kind of drawing and things that would be under the umbrella of creative activities. But then again, I think most young children are creative. You know, I think we have a lot of that bashed out of us through our school lives and society. But I was really lucky that growing up in London, my dad took me, I think I must have been somewhere 9 or 10 years old, my dad took me to the National Gallery in London, just off Trafalgar Square, and just sat me in front of these giant masterpieces of people like Rembrandt and Turner, and I was just sort of blown away by the scale of these paintings, the texture with the oil, just it was kind of mind-blowing. And it really kind of stayed with me. I have a really strong memory of that, and coming home and getting my colouring pencils out and drawing and colouring, making, I was just really, inspired by that. And all through my school life, that was really the one thing that that resonated with me. Going to my art classes, I always loved that. Whatever we did, painting, lino cutting, sculpting with polystyrene, I don't know, whatever. But I went to what you could say is quite a rough school, a comprehensive school in South London, Selhurst High School for boys, right next to Crystal Palace football ground. And yeah, it was kind of tough. And, I struggled at school because there was a lot of violence basically, and a lot of disruption. And, around the age of 15, I went to see, you had this thing where you go and see a careers officer, and they will, talk to you about what you're into and what you like, and then maybe, give you some guidance towards what your next steps are going to be. Now, I wanted to go to art school, and in those days, you needed a certain amount of O-levels, which was a qualification that I wasn't sitting half of those. I struggled at school as well. Sorry, I can see this light. It's moving all the time, isn't it? I struggled at school. Being dyslexic as well, I kind of struggled in certain classes. And anyway, I wanted to go to art school, and I was told to forget all about that, and, to look at some more, I think bus conductor was one of the suggestions, which I was really kind of like not happy about. I left school at 16. I did a few different jobs for a couple of years, and I was just feeling really frustrated with it. I had this burning desire to express myself creatively. And, I was really into music as well, and bands, and I wanted to be in a band. Wasn't a very good musician. And I met a friend at a pub one evening that was at art school, and we had this whole discussion about what they were doing at art school, and photography came up. And I remembered, as a kid, I played around with my mum, had an old Box Brownie camera, and I remember probably, again, around 8, 9 years old, I was given a roll of film to shoot in my mum's Box Brownie, and I just can remember like the excitement and the joy of, this big Bakelite plastic camera, putting the roll of film in with my dad in the bedroom and having to close the curtains and make the room kind of darker. It was all kind of like magical. So when we were talking about photography in the pub, I was really kind of got inspired by that as something that I'd like to get more into. I went to the local library. Obviously, this is way before the days of the internet. And I found a couple of books. And one of those books was called the Creative Darkroom Handbook, I think. And I got this book, and it was just, full of tips and tricks, and it was really interesting. And at the local kind of camera, we had this sort of camera store that had photography, darkroom equipment and stuff, and they had this cheap darkroom starter kit. So I bought that, and I got hold of a really old secondhand enlarger. I don't know, it was like 50 years old or something at the time, really rattly and not that great, but it worked. And I set up a really basic darkroom in my bedroom and just gave it a go. And as anybody that's been in a darkroom, we've all heard it hundreds of times, thousands of times, the magic of seeing that first image appear in the developer tray and just being hooked, mesmerized, and just thinking, this is pretty cool. And I just went down a massive rabbit hole of, not much longer after then, I'd made my bedroom into a full-time darkroom. I gaffer taped the curtains to the walls so no light would creep in, and I'd do these all-night sessions and use the bathroom, use the bath. And then first people, I was living in this share house, and most of the guys were in a band that were my friends, and used to hang out a lot with them. But there was a couple of other guys that used to sort of get up and go to work, and as they'd be getting up, I'd be like emptying the bath and like clearing up and, finishing up my darkroom stuff, and just prints everywhere. And that's sort of, where all that began. I better stop or else I'll just keep going.
No, it's actually really, really interesting. And, that story about finding your first image, seeing it just appear in that tray, it is a magical experience. I remember the first time I did it. It was amazing. The second thing I was going to say is I'm so glad you're not a bus conductor. That was not your way. I am so glad you didn't do that. And then you also said something about sitting in front of a Rembrandt, and I love that, because there is something about standing in front of a Rembrandt, because if it was some of the ones that I've seen, they're just massive. You're like, how could a person do that? And it just like, who has a wall that size? It's like, wow. You can just get lost in those things, and you get transported to another place.
Absolutely.
I'm not surprised.
Like, even the frame is probably about 8 inches wide.
yeah. And he had the big name plate on there. Yeah. You're just like, wow. The textbook can't do it. A book in the library just doesn't do that. You just got to stand there and see those details that they pay attention to, those life-size figures. Yeah. And then I can see Baby Sam going back. Saying, I'm making my Rembrandt right now. Like that's wonderful. Yeah. So, exactly. I also love that the origin story about how you got into what has now become kind of a life's work and a life's passion, and you were kind of making prints. What were your early images? What were you taking photos of back then?
Well, the very, very, very first stuff was really like, I had a roll of film. Well, there's a start, and I had a little Olympus OM1 that my little brother Paul lent me £100 to buy it from a second-hand shop up the road. It was in the window, and I kept looking at it, and this photography thing was starting to come together. So he lent me the money. I bought this camera. I was just sort of photographing anything. It was just really, if I take a picture, will it come out? So, I can remember it was winter and it was snowing, and there was a wheelbarrow in the back garden full of snow. I can remember photographing that. Just a few different things, but, and my friends in the band that I shared the house with, I did a few pictures with them, just really because I wanted someone to photograph. And they were like, yeah, we'll do, because it'd been a band. They, needed some pictures, so it was, but, very quickly I fell into this way of working where it was more about, I taught myself photography. I'm self-taught, and I taught myself photography in the darkroom more than I did out shooting. I'd shoot a little bit, and then sorry, my screen just went off. I'd shoot a little bit, and I'd work with it for weeks and weeks and weeks in the darkroom. I was sort of into sandwiching negatives, and I'd make these cardboard cutout masks, and, like I wanted a frame around the picture. So I'd photograph some candlesticks, and then I'd print the candlesticks just in that edge repeatedly. So I had this kind of pattern as a frame, and then I'd do stuff inside, and it would look a bit dodgy where the mask had left sort of lines, hard lines. So then I was like putting them in bleach baths, fading everything out, putting it in some toner, selenium toner, I don't know what, but putting them in some toners, bringing it half back, pulling it out, getting stuff on cotton wool and rubbing it on and making stuff fade away. And then, then maybe make a color photocopy of it to exaggerate color and distort it. Then photograph the photocopy with color slide film. The next camera I got quite soon afterwards was a 5x4 monorail camera, and I had a film back for it, a 6.7 film back, so I could shoot rolls of film on that, but play with, parallax and distort and stretch. And I was just really into playing around and just seeing what would happen. And I guess I was also very much influenced by the album sleeves of the time. We're talking like late 80s, 87, 88, 89. So there was a record company in London called 4AD. I think their most famous band they did was the Pixies, but they had all sorts of other acts as well. And I loved, like, Vaughan Oliver was the designer doing all of that work. I loved it. It was really textural, and eventually when I started working in the music biz, I met him and I'd go and see him regularly, and I had great conversations with him. But that's probably running ahead a little bit. But yeah, so I was playing around. I mean, I can show you some of my, I've got some examples of, if we can say that this experimental period before I started working in, like, doing record covers was 2 years, it's the latter part of that period. The earlier stuff, I've got it somewhere, but I don't have it even available to quickly, share with you. But I do have some early work. Can I? So let me just see if I'm not going to.
Well, let's wait.
Okay, all right. Hold your horses, Sammy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm kind of curious. So you said you're self-taught.
Yes.
So you said you're self-taught, and you kind of initiated this kind of this workflow. You're learning trial and error. I think personally that's the best way to do it, especially with photography. You start to understand light, and you start to understand composure and exposure. And then you also start to understand the composition, where you want to put people in a frame and so on. So it's like you learn a lot that way. I'm kind of curious. Did you just start working, or did you get any formal education at all, or did you just jump in head first?
No, I just jumped in head first, for better and worse. There's a few major blunders.
I love that.
Major blunders. Giving people original slides with no copy. You'd make a dupe, right? Oh, that's a great shot, right? You make 5 dupes. You give the dupe to the magazine or whoever. I was giving people originals that I don't have now because I'm an idiot. But, that's the downside of being self-taught. I did once. I had a good friend who was really into hair. I knew him since school days, Jimmo, and he was like going to do sessions every weekend, tests for his portfolio. And a couple of times I went with him, and the photographer Tim let me just sort of hang around. So I did 2 or 3 times visit a studio, witness a shoot happening, and at the end I was just harassing him about how to develop my Tri-X, to get it more grainy. That was the thing. It's like, how can I get my Tri-X? Of course, now you just Google it, and in a second, dilute the thing and mix it, But it was like word of mouth or just trial and error. So I can remember asking him about how that happened.
I love that. I think that's really interesting. And what's fascinating is, even if you do decide to go to school or whatever to get a photography degree, they take you through the exact same process that you did, just purely passion driven, that trial and error that happens in a dark room. I don't know that I'll ever show some of my early photographs, but I thought about it. I was like, no, maybe one day I'll do a show. Go ahead.
One thing I was aware of with art at that time, through talking with my friends as well, was if you go, there's this chance that they're going to squeeze all your kind of originality and your passion out and become dogmatic. This is how we do things, and this school is good, and that school is not, and this is in fashion, and that's not. And, when I got into photography, I was not even interested in being a photographer, to be honest. I was thinking of myself as an artist, and gallery spaces was what I was thinking about. And I just thought that this way of making images was quite interesting and different. And I kind of got into it. And I didn't really think I was becoming a photographer until it had sort of already begun to happen. I mean, the two things was I was doing that, and then I was thinking, totally obsessed by music, and I was just like, I want to do record covers. And once I joined those 2 points together, that was my thing. I want to do record covers, and I'd go into record shops, and this is still in the days of vinyl, so you could leaf through all these nice big 12-inch covers, and anytime there's that's a cool image, you take it out, have a look, flip it round, look for credits on the back, the name of the design studio, or perhaps in-house. Some record companies in-house, some record companies use design studio. I just tried to gather as much information as I could to build my little black book for when I felt ready to start harassing people.
I think that's great. It's and your reservation about like this dogmatic kind of, I see some of that does exist, and honestly, that's kind of like what stops, I think, some people. I'm not everyone. Some people just kind of drive right in, and I'm not speaking in generalities here, but you are looking for a way to make this thing a thing or a job or a whatever. But it's like, what I loved about you is that you kind of had an original passion. You developed that passion, and then you were like, I want to do that. And so you kind of start looking at that and doing research on that. Now, what I think is really interesting is, like, I know some people, they find a photo book or a National Geographic, and they're like, I want to do that. Was it album covers for you? Were you looking at any photographers at that time, or was it just kind of album covers?
Not at all. No, if anything, I was more interested in designers. I mentioned Vaughan.
Really?
Neville Brody, Face magazine. I was, design. I've always been told by art directors, especially in the days when I used to do a print portfolio, that I got a really good aesthetic for design, and I have that. But really, I mean, going back to that kid and the art gallery at home, I remember at the foot, come down the stairs, and in the hallway, my mum and dad had a couple of these sort of 1970s cheap reproductions of sort of famous classics kind of thing. And we had on the wall a Chagall, one of those ones with candles and the bride sort of floating in the sky. I always loved that. It was just so sort of trippy, I guess, dreamy, surreal, and I was always intrigued by that. And the other one was a Degas, some ballerinas in beautiful sunlight in the studio, and I, subconsciously, I saw those pictures every day, for years and years and years until I left home, when I was I left home when I was 17. So I think those things were really influential on my idea about imagery. And then as I got teenager, 13, 14, 15, getting into music and buying records, a lot of the record covers are just, straight up photographs. But some of them, especially in the 80s, were very, playful and experimental and not straightforward photographs. And so, I was getting sort of seduced by all of that. And it just made sense, do that and put it on that sort of thing. Easy.
Interesting. So, it's just, it's not one of the things that I've, heard, because I talk to a lot of people that are academics too. But I have talked to a few people that were inspired by music, and there is some kind of connection. Do you think in some ways that images can be considered almost musical in nature? Do you think they have notes? Do you think they can be thought of as almost lyrical?
Yeah, they can certainly be thought of as lyrical. And I think they have a vibration, you know what I mean? Like we say, if a body of work's really great, we might say it sings, So there is that correlation. It's about being transported somewhere or feeling an emotion, and in that respect, there's a strong correlation. I mean, for me, that's the first thing with imagery. I want to feel something, think about it intellectually, fine. But first things first, I want to feel something, and I'm all about the emotions. And I think that comes from music, because I would literally listen to the record of the person I was going to work with and just try to conjure up ideas in my head about, what would this look like?
That is exactly where I was going with it. And so you worked with photographers, not photographers, but musicians early. And when you kind of first began, I guess started doing professional work or whatever, and that was kind of what I was curious about in asking you that initial question was how did you know what would work? How did you know? Was it intuitive? Was it a feeling? Was it research? I know you said you kind of did some research by listening to the album, but how did that, what was that process like for you? And then this will be a great setup to go and check out some of these.
It's different each time. I can't say it was like this because, okay, my first commission was really a direct relationship to some personal work, which I'll talk about when we look at it. But basically, they were like, "We like this. Could you do something like that for us?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." My first ever commission. I was very excited. But then the next one was more of an interpretive situation, inspired by the first, like when I worked with My Bloody Valentine, Kevin, who's the main man, I had a couple of very long conversations with him that were actually quite confusing because he told me everything that he didn't want. And from that, I had to kind of carve my way into it to sort of work out what we were doing, because he told me, "I like what you did on that definition of sound thing, but I don't want," and it just, and the more he went into it, the more I was kind of like not really sure what I was going to do. I had a kind of direction and I had an idea, and I guess I had faith in the process, and I thought, we'll do this. Something will come out of it. Something good will come out of it. And, I think as well, that particular job worked really nicely because it's a very layered image. And if you know My Bloody Valentine sound, it's very, very, very layered. And, they spent such a long time in the recording studio, Kevin Shields is really into that sort of his own version of the wall of sound kind of Phil Spector thing. And he spent, I think he nearly bankrupt Creation Records, the amount of time he spent in the studio. But when you hear the music and you meet him and you chat about it, it all starts to make sense. And, I can't pretend to know exactly what I was doing when I did the record cover, but had ideas. And, it was the good thing about working with those guys is there was room for experimentation. It wasn't like a situation where I had a client breathing down my neck, demanding to know what's going on all the time. They just sat in the corner of the studio in a cloud of smoke, all day and just let me go on. So it was good.
It's interesting. Do you feel like that working in music, there was that level of creative freedom that you had that was maybe different than maybe commercial? So it was almost like they were acknowledging you as an artist. So it was kind of a back and forth kind of play.
It was completely a collaboration, and it was just really cool to be and exciting to be, just sitting with them, chatting about what kind of imagery can we make to go with this music. It was like a dream come true, really.
I say that because so many people treat photographers as if they're just camera operators. You know what I mean? Like they just point it at a thing and then it's there. And so it sounds like you had a great experience. What's that?
Yeah, they do now. More of what you're saying is sort of more true now than it was then.
You'd say now?
And the music industry changed, as you'll hear a little bit later on. So by the late 90s, sort of 10 years later, you still have those relationships with certain artists, depending on the who they are, the people around them, the label they're on and all that. But a lot of it had changed, to the detriment of the industry, really. Yeah. So I'm really grateful and fortunate that I was there at that time doing that stuff, because now it's just way different.
Yeah. I think that's a different podcast to talk about the downfall of the music industry. But it's so interesting to me because I can feel a notable change. And I think a lot of social media has a lot to do with it, and Spotify and some of these things, because people are now curating their experiences. There's no more shared cultural experiences. Like you can't go, have you seen this movie? Or did you hear that on the radio? Yeah. It's now just curated. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Yeah. Also, back then we didn't have, that sounds so old, so we didn't have computers. We didn't have laptops back then, but we didn't, but Kevin Shields probably would have done his own if he had a laptop, because Radiohead, some of their covers they've done themselves, and other, loads of bands will do that because they're artists and they've chosen music to express themselves to, but it doesn't mean they don't know anything about making images. You know what I mean? So in the industry, they're always going to be, all right, we get the people in that do that, and you trust them and they do it, and you work with people that you want to make, and everybody's happy, blah, blah, blah. But, certain artists have got such a kind of, I think Radiohead's a nice example. They've got such a kind of well-rounded, they're definitely artists making music, and
sure.
They, if you do a video with them, I'm sure they're going to have input, and they're probably do half the videos, direct them themselves. I mean, I don't know. I know back in the day they didn't, but you know what I'm trying to say anyway. So
100%. Yeah. Well, and I think photography, they had a nice dance together for a little bit when music was a thing. You could go and buy, a record. That experience of opening up a record and flipping through the pages and looking at the lyrics. And now we consume so many things digitally, and it's not a thing anymore. It's more like we consume it. It's like a dopamine hit, and then it moves on, and it's changed a lot, So I do remember. For me, it was all about the CDs. You know what I mean? I know I was a CD kid and a cassette tape. Yeah, I would have the cassette tapes that you pulled out the sleeve, and you would look at those things. And I loved it because so much of those imageries, it tied to the music, and it also tied to style, and it tied to the poster that you put in your wall and stuff like that. And it had a whole kind of feeling to it that was so unique. And I don't know that you can capture that same thing on a playlist. And so you evolved past that, but let's go ahead and take an opportunity to kind of look at that early work, and then we'll slide into what you're doing now, because you shifted away from that and started doing something different. And I want to make sure we look at that a little bit later. But let's look at some of that early work and get a feel for your eye there.
So this is just sort of some personal work from about a year before I did my first work. So it's around 1989. And I just did some experiments with my friend Will that was in the band that I mentioned.
When you get results like that, I'm like, how did you pull that off? And to kind of see what you're doing, I think about when you talk about the wall of sound that you're talking about with that artist named Kevin. It's I forget the band name now. It's just a few seconds ago, but we did the wall of sound. I kind of feel you doing that. You're like taking these extra steps and doing these things. It's very graphic in nature. Like I'm starting to kind of already with the first image, seeing how you're thinking that way about an image in a different way. What's that?
Yeah. I said it's probably the zeitgeist of the day as well,
Yeah.
If you kind of look at, what was happening 80s, sort of late 80s in photography, in art, in music, in record covers, in sound, it all connects together better. And this is a great, I sometimes when I'm doing classes, I talk about this one as a good example of a happy accident. But this is all the personal work that led to my first commission for Virgin Records in London, which was this, a band called Definition of Sound. Their first record now is Tomorrow. And as you can see, it's very, very similar to that, but more depth in the color and sort of sharper. Yeah. So, but essentially the same kind of idea. So I had these guys in a studio in a kid's paddling pool with water in it, and it's a bit scary with all these lights and electricity and all of that. And it got cold quickly, so they were kind of like, they had to suffer a little bit, but everyone
that's
was
that
really
facial expression. They're just like,
yeah, you can finish. There's another one from the same session.
Oh wow!
So and we had a whole kind of bunch of these. This is probably my favorite one. This yellow and green one,
unbelievable colors.
And then this colors. Is my body. Yeah. No, that's the cross processing. Really, it just really punches up the color if you get it right. And then this is the My Bloody Valentine. That's the front, and that's the back. And there's a funny little anecdote to this, which was I did this shoot just literally a couple of days before Christmas, something like the 23rd. And the girl, I booked a model from a modeling agency to do the photographs with, and she didn't turn up. And her dad phoned up and said, "Oh, she's not well," and all this stuff. And I remember thinking, yeah, she just probably went to a party last night and doesn't want to go and do some record cover because it's not fashion. And she didn't turn up. So the makeup artist, Kim, I said to her, "How would you like to be on a record cover?" And she was like, "Yeah, all right." So that's what we did. So the makeup artist, Kim, thank you very much. And what I did for these was I made do you know what cling film or cling wrap is? The stuff you wrap sandwiches in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I made a wall of that in the studio. Like I had these these poles, they go to the ceiling to the floor. And I just stretched it backwards and forwards, made this wall. And then I got my lights and I shone them at a very kind of acute angle. So that it kind of looked a bit like kind of laser beams and little cloudy, foggy areas of color. And then I shot through it, basically. And again, we did some sandwiching of slides afterwards, so that, this composite of more than one slide on top of each other. So, yeah, that's...
So what was it about abstraction? Was it what these clients were looking for? Or what were you trying to represent with going so abstract? Because who would, if you're doing a pro shoot, say, "Hey, I'm going to put up serene wrap and we're going to do all these colors," you know what I mean? Like, get me to the why of that. Like, what were you trying to achieve?
I was trying to achieve what Kevin chatted to me about in the pub for a few hours, and then we went to the recording studio. I mean, he was sort of saying, like he'd seen where are we? Sorry. He'd seen that, and he said something like that, but I want it to be more dreamy and softer and more sort of like maybe more pinkish colors, and I just want it to sound like the music. And we chatted at great length about it, and I don't remember if it's
that's
the same
what I was
day or I don't know.
That's what I was getting to. I want it to sound like the music. Like, wow, that's just so interesting.
Yeah,
it's just really interesting because. Go ahead.
You can hear the correlation between what it looks like and what it sounds like. The other stuff I have from the music industry is not like that, and there's a big kind of change that happened. So basically, I did some other jobs. I did a book cover, calendar, a couple of other sleeves, and I kind of felt that it was quite difficult to conjure these things up to order. Like, I had to be really inspired. And if I was listening to something and I wasn't feeling it, it wasn't like, oh, I'll just knock out another one of those next Tuesday. And I just felt I was sort of struggling with it in a way. And I was also, a few things happened with working with different record labels that made me see very early on the sort of fickle side of the industry. And I was a bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to keep on doing this. And meanwhile, in the share house where I lived, there was this sort of big map of the world in the bathroom next to the toilet. And I used to look at this map of the world and daydream about all the places I could go traveling with. And kind of long story short, I went traveling with my mate Will, and that opened up a whole new thing for me. So we went, we spent a lot of time in India, we went through Asia, and we ended up in Los Angeles. And we were actually only going to be there a few days, but another one of my friends, my friend Jimmo that I mentioned earlier, he was in LA just by chance working on a job. And one thing led to another. 2 weeks later, we moved into an apartment. I don't know how that happened. So I ended up living in LA for about a year. And during that time, that's when I was introduced to photography, as in I met other photographers, and I was shown William Klein's New York, and having done when I saw those images, they just struck me like right between the eye, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, they have that.
I'm really digging this, and I kind of felt like I want to be a portrait photographer now. I've been doing a little bit of that with my music work, but I remember thinking I want to strip away all these like gimmicks and all this stuff I'm doing, and I just want to concentrate on portraiture and, you know, working with people in the music world and maybe outside of the music world. But that's what I want to do. And then I ended up back in London, and I went round all the people. Like, I was away for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Came back. I went to see all the people that and how I did that in the beginning was I made that black book up, and I used to just harass people, and I want to come in with my portfolio, and eventually you'd go in and, you know. So I just started doing that again, and that kind of got things moving into properly what you would kind of call my career through 90s London and Britpop and all the rest of it.
Wow.
So should I show you?
So let's take a look at it. Yeah, let's jump in and take a look at some of that. I'm kind of curious because you were very abstract in your approach before, and very intricate processes, creating one of a kind. I think. And then all of a sudden now we're inspired. Yeah, we're inspired to do kind of portraiture, but in a different way. And I can't wait to see how you interpret that. So let's take a look.
Okay, so very different, as you can see.
Yeah.
So I'm organizing my end so I can move through them. So that's the far side, shot in LA in 93. So I was back in LA about 6 months after I moved back to London, and I got a chance to photograph them. I was just really into that whole kind of like wide angle kind of hip hop skate thing that was kind of happening then. I'm going to move through these quite quickly because I don't want to get bogged down in all of this, but just give you an idea of it.
It's okay. I think it's fascinating. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's Beth Gibbons from Portishead.
You did the Blur.
Portishead.
You did Blur? That photo series? Oh.
And then Beth Orton, who I worked with quite a few times, which was really great to work with. So I got a few things. That's first sleeve I did with her, Best Bit EP. And then a couple of years later, Central Reservation album that won her a Brit Award in the UK. Really cool. Bootsy Collins. These guys, I don't know if you know them in the States. Black Grape, Sean Ryder, formerly of the Happy Mondays. Got some funny stories about him. Emma Bunton, Baby Spice, Mazzy Star, Elliott Smith, Eagle Eye Cherry I worked with a bunch of times. There's a couple of sleeves.
I remember that one. Yeah.
JK from Jamiroquai. So some of these are editorial as well. I used to work for Esquire magazine and the Sunday Times magazine and Dazed and Confused as contributor. Wow. So I had this nice relationship between the music biz and the magazines, where a lot of the time, especially with those earlier artists like Mazzy Star and Portishead, when they were just coming out, I'd be privy to that, going for meetings in the record labels. Then I'd go to the magazines and say, there's a new band on Go Disc called Portishead, and we really need to photograph them. They're going to be something special, you know. And then they'd send over the press kit, you know, with a sample CD, a photograph, and a bio, and then the editor would decide if I was going to shoot it or not. And then sometimes there were commissions that came the other way, like this one from Esquire magazine. They were like, you know, we want you to shoot JK at his house. And my brief for this was actually, they said, we just want it to be more intimate. And, you know, by this stage, because I've now jumped forward quite a long time, I was doing a lot of my work was around intimacy. And they just said, we want you to be really like at home. And my brief was like, no hats and no dance moves. We just want something very kind of more. So.
Yeah, he was known for that bucket hat. Yeah.
And the moves. I mean, great.
Yeah. That was a great. I remember that. That music video was everywhere.
Yeah, the one with the slide.
It's so interesting. I don't think I've ever seen him like this. Oh wow.
Johnny Lydon, also for Esquire magazine. That was a situation where literally I took two frames and that was it. Right, you've had your moment, and that's it. So of the most difficult.
He knew you had it. That's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they have that experience and they can feel it, but it was not very helpful, you know. But he did give me that, but literally 2 frames, and he Jarvis, it was just great to work with. We did these. It's funny. We did these pictures in Holland Park. It's a park in West London, and we were looking for some other kind of places. And there's all these bushes, and there was a bit of a kind of opening in the bushes, and it was sort of like a cave of bushes, and it had sort of nice soft light in there. And we said, "Should we go in here?" And yeah, so we sort of went in, and I'm taking pictures. And then a minute later, some bloke comes in and he's got the park ranger's jacket and uniform on. And he's like, "What are you?" And I look round. And as I look round, I sort of moved and he saw Jarvis. And he went, "Oh, it's you. Oh, okay, yeah." And he just sort of turned around and went off because he just saw 2 blokes going into the bushes.
He's like, "Okay, carry on."
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
Jarvis Cocker had a photograph.
Wow,
Badly
that's
drawn
amazing.
boy. I worked with him a few times. Always great fun. Up for doing some really funny stuff. Okay, not a musician. So this is my imposter. I had to include. So I photographed a bunch of people outside the music world of the celebrity kind of ilk. But when I got the phone call to photograph Peter O'Toole, I was like, that was childhood, you know, like I remember seeing Lawrence of Arabia as a kid and being blown away by that movie. And, you know, it made a huge impact on me. David Lean, that kind of real slow, epic cinema. So going to photograph him was probably my most nervous and exciting and most memorable photo shoot. And although this is not the image that the Telegraph magazine ran, they ran a much more conservative sort of picture with nice hair and stuff like that. It's quite funny. I was struggling with him as well. And the journalist that was writing the piece was there, and he sort of could see, and I glanced at him at one point, and he could see that it wasn't going so great. He just was like, you know, he just looked like this sort of saggy, baggy old guy, and I was just trying to get some magic, and he was, you know, and he kept wanting to talk with the journalist because he'd done the interview beforehand, and, you know, he was sort of full of stories which were amazing. You know, we did these in a theatre in London. We walked through the corridors, and there was a picture of Catherine Hepburn on the wall, a photograph. And he stopped and looked up at it, and he went, "Oh, dear Catty." And it's like, man, this is surreal. Like, and then he told us a story about when they were stuck in a car in New York, and someone had to pee and there was a bottle. And anyway, he was very irreverent and telling these crazy stories. He was just like surreal. But yeah, I'm photographing him and I'm struggling, and I looked at the journalist and he said, "Oh, Peter, you do know this is for the cover?" And he went, "Is it?" And all of a sudden, eyebrow went up, cheekbones sort of appeared, and all of a sudden, he just looked like a Hollywood dude, like a star. And I just fired 2 frames, 3 frames, and then he just sort of dropped it and just went back to, saggy old guy kind of thing. It was amazing, and this was one of those frames. I just really love it because it's just got so much kind of attitude that I think, if you know about those guys and the Rat Pack and him and Omar Sharif and early 60s, they were the kind of A-list icon celebs of the day. So it was a great privilege to spend an afternoon with him. And when I first met him, they were mid-interview and I was just sort of mesmerized. I went in the dressing room and he was like, "So there I was on the deck, guns blazing away." I was just like, "Oh my gosh, just like, this is driving mad." So yeah, I had a great time with him. Mr. Bowie, bit of an imposter shot, really.
You can kind of see that evolution and how that kind of translated into the work that we're about to look at, these next 2 projects. And so talk to me a little bit about leaving that industry, why you did, and you left, and is in the middle of somewhere. Is this your transition to Australia?
No, the middle of somewhere really is once we're in Australia. So there's like a kind of, from leaving London to settling in Australia, there's a sort of 5-year kind of nomadic period, which will be good to sort of get into, because that is part of the transition. But basically, so something changed in my music photography along the way, which was I got into documentary reportage photography. That's changed the way I was doing my portraiture. It became much more on location, as little, like if I could work with no hair, no makeup, no stylist, no lights, no nothing, that's what I wanted to do, as natural and just really get that emotional kind of connection. What happened, if I can just back up a tiny bit, or rather back up a tiny bit, in the sort of late 90s.
I like the sound effects. Yeah.
Late 90s, 97, 98, the music industry was changing a lot. And the main thing was the big corporations like Sony, EMI, BMG, they were going around London and they were buying up all of these small and medium-sized record labels and homogenizing them into their, company. So what happened was, instead of going to a cool record company with its own identity down a little funky side street in a little building, it's all their identity. It's like this family that you go to that record label, you feel the vibe of the label. Everybody there is like a family. They're very passionate about what they're doing. They're passionate about their artists. It's exciting and it's cool, and that's what it's all about, right? What happened was, these places, as they were getting bought up and getting moved, so, I would go for a meeting, and now I'm going to EMI Tower, and it's this glass tower block, and on floor 2 is this label, and on floor 3 is that label, so on and so forth. And each floor, it's just like homogenized, all the same, like glass cubicles, just really, and the attitude, which is the main thing, started to change. So instead of caring about an artist that you're investing in, we believe in this band. So if the first record doesn't quite do what we expect, we're going to carry on working with them because we believe in them and we love them and we think that this is great and we want everybody to know about it. that changed into, well, we're just going to sign loads more acts and we're just going to chuck it all at the wall. And if it sticks, great. And if it doesn't, fuck off, right? So what happened was they'd sign new acts, and then they'd release a track to the radio. And if it didn't get picked up, you might not. That might be the end of it. You might get another chance. They might release the album, but with less investment. So there's no marketing, there's no vibe, there's no push. It fizzles out and they drop you. You're off. The next one's in. And I was working, because as much as working with sort of household names, for every one of them, I worked with 5 that you never heard of, right? And often this was becoming the case. And I was like, I don't like this. I just don't like it. I don't have a good feeling about it. I'm not feeling good when I'm photographing people, because I'm kind of thinking, you're really excited. You signed a deal 3 months ago and it's all ahead of you. But, from where I am, I can see there's probably more chance it's not going to happen than it is. And I just feel though they were being misled. It was really inauthentic and ugly, and I was not enjoying it. So, with the backdrop of that, I was traveling on the tube, the London Underground one day, and sitting opposite me, there was this elderly, like Jamaican or West Indian couple in matching out, like they had matching white cloth caps, denim jackets, jeans, white plimsolls, like just twins. And I'm sitting opposite them, and I was thinking, what a photograph. They're just like these twins. Great. And I was like, why don't I ever travel with my camera? There's so many pictures to take on the Underground, because in those days it went in my camera bag to the job and the home, and that was it. So I began taking pictures on the London Underground, and very quickly I built up a nice series of images, and I was delivering a portrait to the Sunday Times magazine one day. And this is again, before you wouldn't just hit send, you'd go in with a box of prints and open them out on the table, and everyone would gather around and have a look and stuff. And I said, I've been doing this personal work on the tube. Like, do you want to have a look? And they were like, sure, let's have a look. So I had all these 10x8 work prints, spread them out all over the table. And they were like, this is great, Sam. This is really good. Keep on. We should like run this in the magazine, keep on shooting it, blah, blah, blah. 6 months later, they published that in the Sunday Times magazine, which was a great privilege and an honor to have kind of documentary reportage work published there. And that set me on this kind of course of re-engaging with personal work and also with more documentary work. And I would do occasionally, not a lot, but occasionally I'd do assignments for magazines. I went to Tahiti, that's really glamorous. Also went to a heroin rehab clinic in inner city Glasgow. Not so glamorous, but still a amazing experience. I went to the Amazon, which I'd like to talk about in a moment. But these things, they gave me this new lease of life and this new interest in photography and this new direction with photography. They also informed my music work, my portrait work, which is why images like that one of JK from Jamiroquai and the Beth Orton work, that was the turning point, because that was the first time I'd worked with Beth. Everybody was happy with the work. I knew them. They knew me. It was all cool. They trusted me and Beth to just go off and make photographs without the usual circus. Actually, we did it while she was playing down the west coast of the state. She was doing a mini acoustic tour, and she played Seattle, then day off, then San Francisco, day off, LA, day off, San Diego, day off. And the idea was on the day offs, we would make photographs, but life doesn't always work out like that. And we did most of the photography in the last day, or a day or two. But, it was done with that sort of ethos of being much more loose and more, just getting an authentic connection and a real kind of vibe, So that was a direct impact from that documentary work that continued to inform my music work. Things, carried on, but I was really not feeling it. Then my first daughter, Uma, was born on the Millennium Eve, like literally December 31st, 1999. So that was kind of mad. And then I'm, thinking about, where's Uma going to grow up? What are we doing? Me and my wife, Yael, and my ex-wife, we'd done some traveling in India, and we were just thinking about different ways of living, different lifestyles, different places, different things. And it amalgamated in the decision. There was kind of like I did 2 jobs that really pushed it over the edge. And we were like, right, we're going to do this. We're packing all of our stuff into storage. And we bought one-way tickets to India. And that's where another chapter very differently begins. But those jobs were, I did an assignment to the Amazon. And it was like, at the time, I thought it was like a dream come true. It was the most amazing assignment one could dream of. Can you go to the Amazon with a party of people? We're going to take you to a remote, out-the-way place, and we want you to photograph endangered tribes for this Amazon co-op, which was, fighting against logging and all of that. So I went to that job with a very naive, overly romantic idea. Thinking of painted faces and feathers and beads and these sort of noble, tribal people in the jungle. I was like, but when I got there, it was like quite shocking and disturbing what I encountered, and really I hadn't been properly prepared, and I'd not really experienced anything like that before. So, these tribes were in a really, really bad way. There's one tribe called the Araweta tribe. This is in Para region in the Amazon. They had purposefully decided to stop having children. They hadn't had children for like 15 years, but only like a couple of years prior to me arriving had they been sort of talked back into it, I guess. But they were really bad. They looked really bad, depressed, distressed. Kids had scabies. Half the tribe had been wiped out as well because government agency had given them these blankets. But they'd moved them as well. They thought the sky gods, they thought that, destruction was imminent, and they'd been moved from their ancestral site to this billeted location in these very simple wooden billets, and they've been given these blankets and they'd gone through, and half of them been wiped out, and it was really like quite disturbing. And while I was there, I was really like questioning, what are we doing here? And this conversation was going on, like, they're damned if we do anything to help, and they're damned if we don't, because if no one does anything, they're going to be extinct. And if we help, they have to be sort of, dragged sort of into modern Brazilian, they have to learn Portuguese. All the younger guys, they wanted, football shirts and watches, and, it's unavoidable. So it just was really kind of miserable.
What was interesting is it was 2002 when you did that shoot with Posh Spice or Victoria Beckham. Mm-hmm. 2002. Yes. She was you found her at a time she was just being chased by paparazzi like crazy, and so she was, she was probably had an adverse kind of look at photographers in general. Yeah. But I'm bringing that up because of timing. So you have this Amazon moment. You have this, you meet Victoria Beckham at a time that she was probably in distress with photographers. Go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. I mean,
and
on that point,
but like the universe like doesn't do anything on accident, you know. And I say the universe, but I think photography and maybe life was asking you to change, and it was being very dramatic about it. Meeting someone at a time when they were in like, you know, and then going and seeing, crushing a dream about being you know, maybe a National Geographic photographer, and going, no, we need you to go that way. And do you feel like 100%. That when you look back at that was like the universe going, nope, you're going that way? And you know,
that's right.
you see this, you know, when people get really. Go ahead.
Yeah, you got to be open to it. That's the thing. You got to be open to it, and you got to trust. You know, I acknowledge what I did. A lot of people would think is pretty kamikaze, sort of, maybe even irresponsible. I
know a lot about that. I relate to it 100%. Yeah, when the universe, and I hate saying the universe, like when life asked you to be different. Yeah, you either answer the call or you don't.
100%. Yeah. Like every major junction has had that element to it, and it's so true. You know what you're saying about Victoria Beckham is, you know, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I do want to, you know, I really don't like saying anything. If I don't have something good to say about someone, I'd rather not say anything. And fortunately, nearly everyone that I've worked with has been wonderful and amazing, or at the very least, a few of them that haven't been so great have been professional, and it's been fine and nice. I think John Lydon was testing, you could say, and Victoria Beckham was the only one. So I kind of tend to highlight it because it was at this huge junction in my life. But recently I watched the David Beckham series on Netflix. And when it got to that 2002 period, I was, as you said, you know, I was keenly watching it. And I saw that there is such a difficult time. And all of a sudden, I looked on my whole thing with her through a completely different lens. And I was like, you know what? She was going through such a difficult time, paparazzi making her life rubbish, horrible, disgusting all the time. And, you know, for her, I guess she's got this handful of photographers, the sort of Mario Testinos of the world, you know, that she's got a kind of familiar rapport with, and everybody else is part of them. You know, those guys that hang around in the bushes with the 400mm lenses. Yeah. So, you know, and I thought that for one moment when we were working together. But when I saw the Netflix thing, I was like, you know what? You know,
makes a lot of sense.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Kind of saying, but whilst it was not a nice experience for me, she was going through a very, very horrible time. So that just shows you we never know what someone else is going through. And, you know, we should not be judgmental of other people ever.
Well, you have that element, but you also have this other element that experience was uniquely for you, I think. I don't think that was like a moment for you 100%. And it was less about her and more about you. You met her at that time. You could have met her at any other time. You know what I mean? But that time, yeah. And so it seems as if it was providence for you, you know? And so that gets me into jumping into that series. Let's take a look at some of those images. It was an absolutely fascinating story. I relate to you a lot that listening to life and I call it the universe. I just use that as a general term, just kind of, it's non-threatening or whatever. But but I'm like completely down. Sometimes you get pulled in a direction. You can call it God. You can call it the universe. I just put it all in one. But you're now here, and something's clicked for you, and in the middle of somewhere. It's a good title. Something's clicked for you in the middle of somewhere. And now you have this
We've got
series, and let's take a look at those. Oh, there you are. That's amazing.
Yeah. So do you want to go
Yeah.
into the middle of somewhere? I would rather just like show the images, and maybe if you want to ask something, because I don't think this is a sort of work that, I mean, I don't like writing captions. You know, this work is kind of way different from my music work. I think that there was a period of time when I was kind of like thinking back to my really early work that we looked at, the My Boat of Valentine, etc. And, you know, there was something about the inspiration of those days that was still eating away and burning in my soul, you know, like the Chagall, the painterly kind of Chagall and Degas and Toulouse-Lautrec and all these kind of people. And I think that as far as inspirations, you know, image-wise, that's about all I can say. Beyond that, I would say that I was just really inspired by my daughters, you know, and it's about me doing my best to try to capture something of our relationship and their time growing up here. And just, I mean, I realize it now more than I did at the time, how fleeting that time was. You know, 1 minute your kids are this age and the next minute they're living with their boyfriends in Perth, and you know what I mean? It's just like whoosh, how quickly. So, you know, I just wanted to do my best, you know, and bring together everything that I'd done in the past, I think. And that was a process that really, those years prior to this, from leaving the UK and starting this, there's a 5-year gap. Really kind of like, having to, this is one picture I can talk about, because this is one of the earlier photographs from the series. And again, it's a happy accident, as in, Yael was at the washing line collecting the washing, and I thought, that'll make a nice picture. I'll run up there and take a few shots. So that's what I did. But at the moment that I took the picture, her arm moved across her face to unpeg something. And at the time, you know, I remember thinking, you know, that's a failure kind of thing. Anyway, you know, a few weeks later or whenever it was, looking at the material on my computer, I was like, wow, I really like that. That's good. That works.
Yeah, I do too.
And
It does. Yeah.
I learned from that about the power of, I'm going to have trouble saying it now, ambiguity, being ambiguous.
Yeah.
You know, giving a little bit of mystery, not always just kind of laying it out straight, you know, working with the edges, those kind of things. It just kind of like, there were things that were sort of there in my arsenal, in my toolkit, if you like, but it just kind of was like a key unlocking something. And all of a sudden from then it just flowed very, you know, quite quickly. I think, you know, after then a lot of images started to come.
Yeah, I see a sense of play. I can see you exploring this new place with them and seeing them experience it, and you're exploring your frame. You a lot of that experimentation that you had with your early work is starting to show up here. Yeah.
I like to be loose and playful, and sometimes I'll do things like here, a perfect example. So I was actually driving the car when I took that photograph,
Oh my God.
and I could hear this.
Don't tell people that.
I could hear this ruckus going on in the background, right? And I had my camera on my lap, and I just kind of like turned it on, sort of pre-focused my 28 mil, and then just took it over my shoulder. Boom, took a shot. That's it, and that's what I got. And I used to do that kind of thing quite a lot, knowing that there's more chance of failure than there is of a success. But the trick is that when it does work, it gives you something that's quite, I feel like, if you thought about it too, it's instinctive. Do you know what I mean? If you thought about taking the
100%.
picture,
Yeah.
you're going to lose
One
it.
thing that I've noticed. Yeah, one thing I've noticed with you is that you have, when I was asking you a little bit about what's your approach, and I can feel an intuition with you. The other part that I think is really interesting too is this idea of embracing failure, embracing your failures, your mistakes. It started in the beginning. It has carried through everything. And I'm curious what that means to you.
Well, I should preface with, like, I'm a little bit young for the punk rock generation, but I'm old enough that I had friends with big brothers that were into it, and I was acutely aware of it happening all around me. I was like 10, 11, 12 years old when all that was kicking off. So, embracing mistakes and the DIY attitude is, I guess, part of my kind of makeup in that respect. I think you can learn a lot from mistakes. I think it's only a mistake if you make it so. Well, it depends, doesn't it? You could take too far, but
it's only a mistake if you make it so. It's only a mistake if you make it so. I'm probably going to noodle on that for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your typical family work. I guess it could be, but it's, but you're doing it with an extended attention. You have, I'm just seeing your eye. It's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. So your daughters are older now, and when they look through this work, what do they think? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to just say this one is 19 years old now, and the other one, this is Yali, and Uma is 24 now. Blimey. So,
wow.
Yeah, sorry, you're asking what do they think about the work?
Yeah, when they look back at this work and they see this series, what do they think? Is this something that they keep on as a photo book on their on their shelf, or are they like, Dad's breaking out the album again?
At the time, it was like eye roll, 100%. Like,
you're like,
just really kind of like, even, my friends would sort of say, oh, when you're older, you'll really appreciate this because you've got this whole kind of catalogue of growing up, and it's beautiful and wonderful. And they were just sort of not that interested in it, or it was just so normal because they grew up with me taking pictures and photography at home and all of that stuff. So, but more recently, they both have a copy of the book, and Yali told me that just about a year ago, she sat down and actually looked at the book properly for the first time since sort of back in the day. And she was so sort of appreciative of it. It was really touching and beautiful. Like she she really appreciated that there was this, record of their childhood, and really loved it. So that was really nice to see.
Yeah. Well, and to do it with your skill, it's not very often that a parent has your kind of skill set and you're able to expose properly. You're playing with composition. You're actually you have and you're creative in the way you push the images, and it also says a lot about the selects that you pull through, the things that you actually select as an image to keep. Like, come on, they're like this one. These are magic. This is life.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's really strong
because them climbing trees happened, quite often. How many times did I try to get tree climbing photographs? And I just struggled with that for a long time. Finally, this happened where I just put myself more inside the situation as opposed to observing it from the outside. Got inside. But one thing I should point out, that it can be thought of that, you have the skill set, you have the subjects, they're there all the time. Too easy, But actually, no, really, really difficult, way more difficult than any other thing I've done. And the reason why is because whenever that moment is happening, you're doing something else, like always. And, you can have a look at domestic arguments. I'm just going back because I just want to tell you a prime example. This picture. That evening, I was cooking dinner and I was making pasta, and there was a big pot of boiling water. So the windows steamed up. Now I'm, in the kitchen chopping onions or whatever, and I glanced over and I saw Uma was making some sort of patterns and shapes in the steam on the window, as you can see. And I was like, that's a picture. So I turned off, the gas on the oven, and I always have my camera sort of in arm's reach. Got my camera, went out the other door on the other side of the house, quickly ran around to the back, stood there, got my focus, took like a couple of shots, and then she noticed me. And then, of course, the whole moment fell apart. But I had the shot, and then I went back in and carried on making dinner. Now, I have had a few situations where I had, not arguments, but discussions about all of that, because it's always at an inconvenient time. It's never Saturday afternoon, I feel like taking some photographs. No, it's not. It's always that Tuesday, 6:30, you're making dinner, or you got to look after the girls while they're having a bath, and they're like, no, don't do that. So it's, it was always, I learned, because in the beginning, I'd think to myself, oh, that's good. I'll note that down and I'll get that next time. And then I realized, even if it is riding your bike up and down the path, there's never a next time, because everything's different. The light will be different. The jackets are different. It's never going to be that moment. So if you see it or you feel it and you're like, this is something, you have to act on it on the spot. And the trick that I had was I had to kind of do that and then get back to the dinner without anybody kind of noticing that I stepped away. So that was my kind of...
Wow. That's a pure exercise in being fully present. And like realizing moments and taking advantage of the actual moment. That's and that tip, I think anybody that's trying to capture photography of their family in those moments, especially if they're a pro, if there's someone that's actually done this thing, that is really, really helpful. That is, and it's really interesting, and it's really, really strong. You did this series, something kind of clicked for you, and then you started to kind of evolve, and so that project kind of made its way into a book, and so now you're kind of focusing on a new series called Neighbors. So talk to me a little bit about what that transition was like, and what were you thinking with this series, and how did this project that we just looked at inform this new body of work? How did that transition into this new one called Neighbors?
They're very much related. So Neighbors, first of all, Neighbors is working title, so I don't know if that will be what it is when it comes out as a book, hopefully next year, 2025. I'm working towards that. So first of all, Neighbors is like my friends and community. So I see it as an extension of the Middle of Somewhere, the next ripple out, if you like. The transition, I was sort of a little bit shooting Neighbors while I was still shooting the Middle of Somewhere, but I wasn't thinking I'm shooting Neighbors, because I would have my camera with me always. And when my friends here, I've got some quite wonderful and eccentric friends in Bailing Up. There's lots of artists, musicians, alternative lifestylers, permaculture kind of stuff going on here. So, there were times when we would visit friends back in the day. My girls would be there, so I would be photographing them, and maybe one of my friends from the Neighbors project would be, become in an image from the Middle of Somewhere. So it was they sort of cross over a little bit. And when it got to the time to publish the Middle of Somewhere, which was, how do you even know when you get to that? I thought I was there a couple of years earlier. I had enough material. I was already in dialogue with my publisher, Eva from Seba in Italy. And she was like, I think you need to do a little bit more still. There's a few gaps, bits and pieces, so it was just carrying on like that. And I had one of our once, twice a year Zoom call catch up, showing her some more work and talking about a few ideas to do with bookmaking. And she surprised me. I thought she's going to say, yeah, it's got another 6 months, another year, keep going. And she said, I think we're ready to publish. And I was like, whoa, okay. So, that's when that process began. And we worked very closely together for quite many months, about 9 months, all in all. Such a huge archive. It took us months trawling through it to get that organized, and then coming up with the concept and design, and we just did everything together. So like the graphic design, sequencing, everything. So then the Middle of Somewhere was published, and I've been very fortunate to have that exhibited all over the world, and I've won some nice awards with it as well, including a Lucy for the photo book, which I still can't believe how that happened. It was like, did they mix up the cards or whatever? But apparently not. So that was like amazing. But yeah, so as Neighbors was finishing, I was just sort of carrying on, but now more attention on my friends and community, still photographing my daughters a little bit. But they were getting older as well. So my eldest daughter, Uma, was about 15 when the book came out. And that's around the time when she was starting to get a bit self-conscious. And the internet was more of a thing. And it just felt like now is the right time to just sort of pull back from that. So it just quite seamlessly moved into my friends and community here. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So it is sort of slightly different because obviously the middle of somewhere, it's all in my own domestic, realm. But apart from that, it's sort of quite similar. Most of my friends, they're pretty used to me with the camera by now. So,
That's awesome.
In fact, if I don't have my camera,
take a look.
Sorry?
You're a photographer, right? Come on, where's your camera? No,
yeah.
Let's take a look. Let's see what you got. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So I should say with this, it's not a polished edit, number one. It's a work in progress. And the images I'm going to show you, most of them, they've not even been graded. So they're like kind of out the camera. So sometimes they're a bit bright, a bit dark, a bit this, a bit that. It's not tuned up. But it's, I try to get it in camera as much as I can, coming from my film and especially slide film days. So most of it's sort of, yeah. And some of these are already out of the project. So, yeah, you have to sort of look at it in that loose work in progress kind of way. Oh, why is it done
were
that?
you trying to take the same approach as far as like photographing them as you were with your kids? Or do you feel like it's a little different here?
It's a little bit different because the context and the subject matter is a little bit different. But apart from that, it's the same. It's just, if I'm just doing me for me, not for any commercial situation, I don't really think of my work as projects. Obviously they kind of are. But it's like diary work. Like if you and I spent 6 months, in a place together or whatever, then you're going to end up being the subject of some of my work, unless you explicitly tell me you don't want me, which I would respect 100%.
No.
So, what I mean?
To get an original Sam Harris? No, I would be all about that.
I don't kind of draw a box around it. I'm doing the same, but then me doing the same chops and changes because essentially I'm working all the same way, but then some things change. All of a sudden I'll change lens and then do something 2 months with a different lens and then go back to the other one. Or all of a sudden I'll start shooting with flash for a while and then little, but it's the same. Okay, so I'm going to run through this now.
And so I think it's interesting too. It's a natural progression because, like, you have your intimate family in that project, and then you can flip through as you wish. But now I always go back to this. It takes a village to raise it takes a village to raise a kid, because it's not just you in those intimate moments. You have a lot of other people that are involved: family, friends, schools, parents of their friends, and all these other people that kind of are a part of that. What did you feel like that was also super important to kind of include? Talk to me a little bit about that. Is that kind of the idea that it takes a village, kind of, or was it? What were you thinking there?
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, I never thought about it exactly like that, but yes, it's it's about a community that's like an extended family, and the support and the sharing. I feel incredibly blessed to live here and have these friends, and I think it's great. And it's like I kind of want to be able to share that with people. Like, why do you live where you live, and who are your friends, and what do you do? It's just, yeah. If I'm not at home, with my family, which I'm not anymore because they've all left.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with my friends, or going to visit them. Sometimes it's parties. It's just how it rolls, really.
Yeah. Seeing them in their different times and them sharing stories of your kids, and it's a fascinating like step out. I can definitely see that as kind of an extension of what you were. So when you look back at the series, what does it invoke in you? Like when you think about this, the feeling that you get when you look at this. I love that word, extended family. What does that mean to you? When you think about this series and you start flipping through these, what does it invoke in you?
Family, as in extended family. Quality of life. What's the word? Hang on. It's not consumerist. It's very back to basics, do it yourself, make our own entertainment a lot of the time. With so many artists, like my friend Sandy makes clothes for everyone and crazy outfits. You go to a wild party, as wild as any parties I've been in, fortunate to go to in LA or London. And then the next day you go and visit your friend and her daughter's just taking the horse for a walk in the dam because it's so hot. And you get that,
Yeah.
So it's like, really, I like artist statements and all the, I can narrow it down to one word, which is love. That's what my work is about. And that's probably really cheesy. I can imagine some people in the art world like throwing up. But really, that's what it is about. With my daughters, it's about that love that we have for each other, I have for them, sharing that, embracing that. And it's the same with my community and my friends, And I hope that my work inspires people to maybe, to make some changes, to be positive themselves. That's not even that's a photograph of a photocopy. Whoops. Someone wrote a review about the middle of somewhere, and they said something about really Sam Harris is an old hippie, and I am. So, So that's what's important to me, positive vibrations, love. And with this community, back to basics, permaculture, do it yourself, camaraderie, living off the land, friendship, fun times. Whenever there's a birthday, my friends like to put on shows. So here you have backstage getting ready to do a sort of a ballerina number. But as you can, you get the idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so much of our stories these days, you don't hear these stories as much as you used to. It just seems like everyone's got bigger concerns.
Yeah.
And
Or
the world's on fire in so many different places. It's almost like, well, yeah, this is a universal truth. We don't have to look at this, kind of thing. Do you feel like, in some ways you're pulled back into this to kind of, remind yourself of that? Or do you just feel like this is your everyday? And so this is what I want to show.
Yeah. If I don't go on the internet and I'm just in a bubble down here, then this is my everyday. But obviously we don't live in a bubble. So it kind of is cathartic in some respects. I'm just really grateful, I mean, it's intergenerational as well. That's one of the things I really love about it here. You go and hang out and your friend's dad's there and he's 80, and then the grandkids are running around and they're like, not even teenagers. And then there's the 30-somethings, and then there's the 50-somethings, and it's all together, and there's no, what's the word? No division, no separation.
Yeah, right. No one's in categories. It's just we're all one big group. Yeah.
Everybody's open. Everybody's very accepting of everybody else.
Interacting,
even when we don't see eye to eye with everything, and really it's like what communities we sort of used to be like, and I think that, look, I grew up in London, so, and I often spend time in big cities. So it's not like I'm down here isolated and I don't know, what's going on anywhere. It makes me all the more grateful for it, because I think it's something that's been lost in so many places. So I really value it, like what we have as a community. And I'm really lucky and grateful that I can photograph it, and hopefully I get to share that with people, and I hope that it inspires them, in whatever way that is. Maybe it's going to be to grow some veggies in the back garden and not shop at a supermarket. Or maybe it's going to be to buy something used and regenerate it into something purposeful and good now, instead of going and buying some cheap, crappy plastic thing, those kind of things. But beyond that, just about love and respect for your neighbour, for your fellow man. It's a beautiful community, and I'm privileged and grateful, Oh, that's the rabbit cage I mentioned from another time. So that's a shot of Uma with one of the rabbits that somehow got overlooked in the middle of somewhere, so I will use that in Neighbours. That's a picture of Uma and Yali that my friend Sandy did. So they do paintings and drawings and all of that, so sculptures. So there's elements of that I need. I have material, I haven't edited it yet to involve it.
Wow. Stories like this, looking at images like this is something that inspired the creation of this show. I wanted to hear stories, and I wanted to hear stuff like this. And so I want to encourage you to keep up with this one. I think it's, there's a lot of people that I think today probably feel like a story like this is far away from them, like it just doesn't exist anymore. But in what I'm seeing here, it's a lot closer than we think it is. sometimes.
Yeah,
And
it is.
that we are in these maybe half-meter bubbles, and but if we just put this down, there's a world out here that's just waiting for us, and so I think it's really interesting, and I think it's something you should definitely keep up. And if you're not finished yet, I'm sure you have a large archive. I just want to continue to encourage you. And what's great is that you get these very intimate moments. They're comfortable with you in the camera, so they're just being themselves as usual. And I love how diverse your experiences are, how different they are, and how it seems like your environment is changing all the time, and you're really engaging out there. You're actually out there living, and you're not stuck in your house watching people live. You're actually living. And I think that's the message from this, and that I really, really like, is that, I think there's a whole entire generation. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I used to live life. I was out there living it. I was building forts in the woods in Florida. Yeah. We were doing crazy things that I can't even say on this recording because I don't want to admit it publicly. But we were just living life. And then there was a generation that stopped doing that and started watching other people live life. And I think there's something about it in those images that reminded me so much of that part of me that does that. But, so much of going out and living life, also makes you courageous. It teaches you courage, it teaches you bravery, it teaches you ingenuity, it teaches you all these things that I fear that when people are doing this, they don't get, And
yeah, 100%.
It's just kind of I think there's a lot in that is really quite amazing. So I'm very thankful for you for taking me into that. I really appreciate it.
I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to sit and talk for a few hours about me and my journey. No, I'm really grateful.
How does...
And, one thing I can just say about what you're saying about the choices we make, I think that if I go back to that sort of 19-year-old me that fell into a dark room and wanted to do record covers, the tenacity and the belief that could happen, there's probably born out of naivety more than anything else, which is why I'm, in the right situation, a bit of naivety can be quite helpful, but I just kind of learned that for me, I have to follow what, where my soul is kind of leading me. And if it's not working, I just can't carry on treading that path. We only have one life, right? And, before you know it, we're all going to be dead and buried, right? So, I'd like to make the most of that, and I mean, I want to be able to give back as well and be of service and share and help and hopefully, inspire other people to do positive things, and that's how we make changes. So I want to uplift people, and just try to kind of, there's those times when you go to an exhibition and you leave with a spring in your step and you're really inspired. I remember years ago at the Hayward Gallery, there was an exhibition of Apollo NASA photography, Michael Light. I think it was just called Moon, 1998. Huge, not the sort of thing you'd think, oh yeah, go and check that out. But it was amazing, and it just left me feeling so kind of inspired. And it was like, oh, what a great exhibition, what a great book. And and other times you can leave being really disturbed, and that has a purpose, and it can be thought-provoking, and it can push people towards making changes. But unfortunately, whenever I've been in a gallery and there's been confronting images of war, let's say, on the wall, everybody's been standing around sipping champagne, and I'm just like, kind of struggle with that. And how I feel about certain areas of photography for myself. I mean, I think it's very important work to do. I can remember seeing a Don McCullum exhibition in the 90s, but I was like, I felt really useless after that. I was like, what am I doing? It's photographing blur. Don McCullum's done some really, really important work. I got his book, Unreasonable Behaviour. Highly recommend that for anybody interested in photography in general or that kind of area. Fascinating journey that he had into war photography and how damaged he was, afterwards, which I suppose is inevitable. But yeah, I appreciate people have to do that. Well, they don't have to. People choose to do that, and it's very important. But now there's also another problem in the post-truth. What's real, what's not real. There's a whole nother curly one to everything that's on the internet at the moment. So
yeah,
I kind of feel like I do my little thing, and hopefully it will just touch, a handful of people to do, to be more positive, or to know they can make those changes, they can live that life. You have to kind of visualize it in some way, and then believe it's so, and walk towards it. Even when you're in India and you're going, well, I really fucked up, because I was at the peak of my career in London, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, fucking idiot.
Actually, I had a moment like that. So I won't share my story, but I had that same kind of moment, and I made the same kind of leap. And I have to encourage people to do that as much as they can. I'm not sure where the leap is going, but part of it is me showing up on a camera, talking to people like you. So I'm very grateful for your time today. And you've had some very insightful moments on this show. And I just have my final question, which is, I just want one little bit of final insight from you, which is, there's a lot of people that follow this that are photographers themselves. And they are trying to make their way in photography somehow. Huh?
Sorry, I said that's when I get imposter syndrome. I said that's when I get imposter syndrome. When you said, "Oh, there's photographers that'll be," I'm like, "Oh, oops."
Yeah. Well, they watch this show. I guess maybe that's your advice. Do you have any advice for people that are trying to be photographers to try to get their work out there? What would you tell someone?
That's starting out in photography in 2024?
Whether you're starting out or just trying to make their way in it, like just in general, what would you tell people that want to be a photographer? And I know that word sounds loaded to you.
Yeah. What are you doing it for? If you're doing it for a job and money, fine. Good luck to you. I respect that. Good luck. And if, I don't know if I am, certainly not with any of this work. It's just too cheesy to say, be true to yourself and follow your heart. It's like, but you got to find what resonates with you, for you. Find what resonates for you and believe in that. And you do you. Ultimately, everybody is unique. Every single human being on this planet, is a blessing. We're all unique. We're all so, the chances of each and every one of us being born, the odds are like, millions to one that any of us are going to be alive. So if you, be grateful for that. And, okay, now I'm going down another rabbit hole. I don't want to go there. But
no, it's great. It's great.
If you recognize your uniqueness and you learn yourself, and in doing that, I think it comes out in your work. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not good at giving advice. I have to kind of go and sit down and think about it, and I'm too self-conscious because I like that part of it though, and the part is it's that first part. Go ahead. I was just going to say I could quote Spinal Tap for you with some advice, which is have a good time all the time. But maybe I'm being facetious by saying that.
No, well, it shows up in your work, and so like that. The thing is I like that question a lot. Partly to the fact is you get done and you're kind of recapping your work. You're at this very reflective moment, and when you ask that, I seem to get a very similar answer over and over again. And I think later on down the road, I'm going to probably supercut all these little moments and show that there is something to that message that you just shared that is kind of a universal thing, because I'm not just getting it from you coming from London to the bush, talking to someone in Australia. I'm hearing this from people all over the world, and there is a lot of things that make us different, but there's something about that, staying true to yourself, that is super important, and the way it shows up in photography. So thank you so much for your time today. It really was great. Thank you so much for the conversation. Really.
Thank you as well. I would just add to that, it's not always easy, and you do have to remember that 10,000 hour thing that says you have to do something for 10,000 hours before you. I do think really from 1989 until 2007, I don't know how many hours that is, but that's really all right. I'm doing myself a disservice. The latter part of my London years, I started to have my uniqueness. But yeah, okay, waffling. But yeah,
no.
Shut up.
No, you're like reiterating the point that I was making there, which I really, really appreciate. Is I've done quite a few of these interviews, and now I'm starting to I'm not trying to make links, but I am kind of coming to some kind of understanding. But every time I think I figure something out, I don't have it figured out. And this experience has been unfolding in such a unique way, and I'm glad you're part of the journey. So thank you so much for your time today, really.
Thank you very, very much. As I've said, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. It's been great talking with you, Patrick. It's just wonderful to be able to kind of trawl over all this stuff and really kind of dig down into it and talk about it.
All right. And since you've made it this far, thank you so much for joining us today on the Urbanaut Podcast. If you like content like this, consider liking, sharing, and commenting down below. That actually helps us with the algorithm. So if you can, please like, share, comment, do all that stuff. It helps us a lot. The other thing you can do to support programs like this is to become a subscriber with us on Patreon and help contribute to the show. And we can keep bringing you great guests and having great conversations. And as always, we'll see you next time.